the challenges that we face now are not how do we optimize glass and steel, but how do we optimize or synthesize and create a symbiosis between our environments and our architectures.
Terwijl de hedendaagse wereld bezeten is van het gemak van high-tech, pleit de Amerikaanse landschapsarchitect Julia Watson voor een nieuwe en tegelijkertijd traditionele aanpak. Ze noemt het Lo-TEK.
We need to allow nature to be symbiotic with our cities and with our communities. The mission of Lo-TEK is really to make a world that will be multi-generational, so that we're not just thinking about one generation, that my children will have a terrible life, but that their great-great-grandchildren will still be prospering, still have a wonderful life, and still be in a world that reflects the world that we live in today, that not all will be lost. So Lo-TEK means local, and TEK means Traditional Ecological Knowledge, which began as a project, a research study looking at indigenous traditional knowledge systems and how we could incorporate this knowledge into contemporary design. And really over the years, it's transitioned into a movement that's really a global movement. And it's ways of really understanding how to connect humans with nature and with all different other species to create technologies when the technologies can be agriculture, the technologies can be water cleansing systems, they can be bridges.
In Noord-India leeft een volk dat Lo-TEK al eeuwenlang onder de knie heeft. De Khasi. Ze bouwen geen bruggen, maar laten deze natuurlijk groeien.
They create initially this bamboo scaffolding, and then they plant 2 trees on the side of a river, and then they take the root systems of those trees that are growing down the secondary root system, they interweave them through the bamboo scaffolding, allowing them to grow in a particular type of form that will then support and overtake. And so what you'll be left with is this actual living system.
Cái mình sẽ nói mình giải Syrian của Syrian tao quá mình làm một phát triển là cái gì làm xóa mình xóa nhiều xuống nè đâu đến khả năng nghe bây giờ không khả năng chụp phải xóa giờ lại xóa cái đơn bạc tại xóa ai mà luôn mà lá xin mà phải khả năng này và cho nên những cái mua tạp thông đi khả năng bán nhiều thế này những chuyện Kemudian dalam tu beni ada ham tu beng hao jadi, hai jadi, penbat hai jadi. Maka jadi anda kau kan kalau fortune kalau kham hai jan, dan một tingkat kham scam. Nah benda ni lah dan terpang hai ubala thong dah kasinong, dan sim benang sete. Wala thong dak chnam na sete wala thong dak chnam ap chi ap na ka wei ka snam jak wei snam na koi snam ka toi snam un nak kham jiram ke mo chom bereu babwa.
Door deze toepassingen van de natuur vast te leggen en te delen, hoopt Julia Watson mensen te inspireren om deze technieken ook toe te passen in de moderne wereld.
This is it. This is finally it. This is the first time I've seen this.
Vivian Kwan, medeontwerper van de Fab Tree Hub, raakte ook geïnspireerd.
I mean, it almost camouflages itself within the forest around it, right? Which is exactly the intention of it.
So what did it start with? When you first came to site to construct it, where did it begin?
How can we grow spaces? How can we grow architecture instead of felling and depleting our resources like forests and things like that. So the obvious, or maybe not so obvious answer is like, let's try to use living trees then. So those rectangles on the top are a second tier of planters to make this a two-story structure.
And is that inspired at all by the living root bridges? Because the living root bridge is a double-decker. So there's a double-decker system. Now they're now making a triple-decker system. So eventually maybe you can go up 2 and 3 floors as well.
Yes, so that would be ideal. Right now we're working on 2 stories, but yes, of course, the root bridges are an inspiration. I think it's a gem for, you know, the whole world to really appreciate what they were able to do.
Yeah. It's very inconsistent with how we conceive of architecture right now. Architects want to be the biggest and the most obvious, the landmark, the thing that we see from space. This building is doing the opposite. It's trying to be part of its environment in every way possible. It is having a direct connection and relationship at all times of the year, at all times of the day, with its environment.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like a cathedral.
Look at that, it's a bird's nest.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's working. I mean, this is a sign of hope, right? If we were to design a system like this in Brooklyn or in New York City, we're really talking about creating this experimental, observational scaffolding and skin system. So if we're creating a building for habitation, we do have to have a thermally insulated interior. We will have to have plumbing. We will have to have different types of infrastructures. But it doesn't mean we can't create facades for that interspecies exchange created similarly with this type of modularity. And over time, technology is going to take that leap. And once we start to build all these systems, we start to integrate them, in 10 years' time, we may be having new types of systems and new types of mechanism, new types of understandings about materiality so that we can start to leap forward. But we need to make this initial understanding and take from this what we have, which is a structural skin and a modular skin and a facade. And we can adapt that and we can build that into buildings so that we're not just relying on a city of concrete and brick and glass, but we can have cities where the skin of a building takes in moisture, provides habitation, and really has that exchange with what's happening in its environment. There's just so much incredible potential in the generative ability of this type of architecture to create different types of forms. And you can imagine, like, all these tiny little shoots will one day grow into this type of form. And so this could have been this can be so many different types of forms. There's so many different types of architectures and opportunities that you can see in every single branch within this building. You don't have to put much else into the system. You need to give it water, you need to give it wind, you need to give it other species, you need to give it soil, and the building literally grows itself. The collective mythology that guided us for a really long time about how we connect to our world through inherently sustainable practices, through resources available to us locally, that was completely disrupted by, a global theory that we call now globalization. There has been an adaptation of the mythology of what we call technology. That technology has to be a certain way. It has to be optimized, directed towards high production, expendable. It has to be usually extractive. We have come to this point where we have such fractured societies of incredible wealth and incredible poverty, where we have cities and urban centers that are choked with air that we can't breathe and just emitting water that we can't drink. But before, there were ways that we were doing things that were sustainable, that were laden with the idea that resources were not infinite. That did mean that we had to work together collectively and collaboratively and share and care for one another. The most incredible thing is that some communities have been wanting to share knowledge that hasn't been forgotten, that has been evolved for 1,000 years about sustainability, about resource sharing, about connections with nature, and about how those connections with nature can support our survival. And Lo-TEK, I think, allows an opportunity, an open platform for the sharing of that knowledge. There's a lot of people called futurists, or that they really call themselves futurists these days, people imagining what our future could be, which is essentially, I think, one of the roles of design. If you reposition that and think about the idea of ancestral futurist, and this is a term that comes from Ailton Krenak. He's a Brazilian indigenous author. He talks about that when we imagine the future, what we really need to capture is the idea that the future is actually ancestral. It's around us, it's here for us, it's available to us. It was imagined by our ancestors thousands of years ago. It's been continually in our imaginations collectively for thousands of years, because it's one of the ways that human beings think. They think about generations ahead. So we still have the ability to consider alternatives, to look to the past of communities and countries like the Netherlands and say, well, how are we coping with floods before? What was the way that we were supporting agriculture and community and economy in a localized way that was really dealing with the impacts and conditions that we were feeling locally before? And we have an opportunity to think about how do we now move forward with a hybrid type of thinking, using the technologies and mythologies of thousands or hundreds of years ago with the technologies of contemporary society today. So the future we can conceive, there's multiple futures, and one of them is ancestral, has been conceived before, and will embody the ideas and technologies and the histories of some of the societies that have been around for thousands of years. We can start to see cities that really do bring in these soft systems and really think about, well, how do we accommodate ecologies? How do we shift our infrastructures so that they really are working and able to adapt because they're living and responsive to these kind of conditions that are changing quickly on our shorelines? How do we start to adapt to humidity levels? How do we adapt to 50-degree temperatures outdoors? We know we can't just keep on air conditioning. So we need to start to create canopies, really extensive canopies in cities. We need to bring up our asphalts, have soil, have water that can rain down, that can permeate into the surface of our cities and make its way back into our water tables. We need to basically release a lot of the control that we have over our city landscapes and allow nature to be symbiotic with our cities and with our communities.